1 Kings 3 through 5 describes King Solomon's rule over Israel, which lasted from 970 to 931 BC. It was the golden era of Israel's history. Solomon controlled more territory and had more wealth than any king in all of Israel's history. His fame reached far and wide. The Bible says that people came from everywhere, sent by every king on earth who had heard of his wisdom, to listen to Solomon. Such statements raise a number of questions. What do we know about the world situation in Solomon's day? What were the dominant powers? How were other nations doing economically? And how did the world situation affect Solomon's rule in Israel? Let's start with Egypt. Up to the time of Solomon, no ancient Near Eastern empire had greater influence over the land of Canaan than did Egypt. Nevertheless, for the period during the reigns of Saul and David, Egypt was weaker than it had been in times past. Egyptian historians called this time period the 21st dynasty, from 1069 to 945 BC, which is part of the third intermediate period of 1069 to 656 BC. This was a period of Egypt's history marked by chaos, disunity, confusion, and a decentralized government. The Egyptians were under constant threat from Nubia and Libya. Also, Egypt was divided and thus ruled by two independent dynasties, one in Upper Egypt to the south and one in Lower Egypt to the north. Powerful military leaders and high priests ruled in the south, while kings of nobility ruled in the north. Their economies appear to have been unremarkable during this third intermediate period. In 1 Kings 3, we learn that Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, by marrying Pharaoh's daughter. Such alliances were mutually beneficial to the kings involved. Most scholars believe the Pharaoh was Siamon, a king from Egypt's northern dynasty. This was a wise alliance for many reasons, but primarily because Egypt and Israel had a common problem. The Philistines were frequently a thorn in the side to both of them. Egypt and Israel's most important inland trade route, running parallel to the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, connecting Egypt to the rest of the ancient Near East, known as the International Coastal Highway, went right through Philistia. Siamon's invasion of Philistia, with the probable support of Solomon, cleared the way for uninhibited trade, and the deal was sealed with the marriage of Solomon to Pharaoh's daughter. The fact that the Pharaoh made an alliance with Solomon points both to Solomon's strength and to Egypt's weakness. If Egypt was as strong as it had been in times past, the Pharaoh likely would not have seen the need to make the alliance with Solomon. Of course, Egypt was not the only regional power. Nearby Assyria and Babylonia were experiencing great hardship and decline during the time of Solomon's reign. Each were fighting for their own survival. The causes were probably twofold: extreme drought and foreign invasion. First, the significant drop in the amount of water flowing down the Euphrates and the Tigris had devastating effects on the economies of all Mesopotamia, since nearly every major city was located and dependent on these rivers. Second, hoping to ensure their own survival, Aramean raiders wreaked havoc for Assyria and Babylonia, invading their heartlands, conquering some of their cities, and taking control of vital trade routes. Mesopotamia's urban economies, therefore, were weakened by famine caused by drought and by the loss of trade routes that were under the constant harassment of Aramean raiders. During Solomon's reign, the Assyrians and Babylonians were not the great kingdoms they once were, nor were they the great empires they would once again become. Unlike the superpowers of Egypt, Assyria, and Babylonia, Phoenicia appears to have avoided the superpower calamities and actually thrived economically during this period. The Phoenician cities of Tyre, Sidon, Byblos, and Arwad each had harbors on the Mediterranean Sea. Each had the reputation of having skilled craftsmen and seafaring merchants who carried their goods all over the Mediterranean as far west as to Spain and brought back with them goods and luxury items from all of the ancient Near East. They had their own distinctive and highly desirable pottery. Phoenicians also had a good reputation for trading these luxury goods, including dark red and purple dyes, cloths they produced themselves, ivory they obtained from Africa, and precious metals from various places. They made the most profit, however, from their own homegrown commodity of woods, such as cypress, algum, and cedar from Lebanon that were all in high demand, especially in places where lumber was scarce, such as Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Phoenicians built their own ships with the wood and then used those ships to carry their goods to other markets. Given the Phoenician skills and commodities, one is not left to wonder why Solomon used his father's relationship with Hiram, the king of Tyre, to acquire wood and craftsmen for his building projects and import of fine wares. While the Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, and Phoenicians were the major players during Solomon's reign, there were several other smaller nations worth mentioning. Given the visit from the Queen of Sheba and the gold Solomon brought in from Ophir, apparently Solomon had friendly relations with the people of Arabia. They appear to have learned how to use irrigation to grow crops, and they were involved in a great deal of trade. About this time, they also began to use camels extensively to transport their wares. Regarding the other nations on Israel's border, such as Edom, Moab, and Ammon, David subdued these nations, and they remained under Israel's control until Solomon's death. Even though Syria was militarily and politically weak and became closely aligned with the Hittites, who were also militarily and politically weak, the Syro-Hittite culture apparently had a reasonably stable economy. They had peaceful trade relations with a number of nations, including Israel. Amazingly, God blessed Solomon not only by making him both militarily and economically strong, but also by making Israel's enemies and potential enemies weak. And those who were on friendly terms with Solomon were blessed themselves. Such a situation was reminiscent of God's promise to Abraham to bless those who blessed him and curse those who cursed him. God worked both in the smallest details to bless Israel and on the grander scale of the entire ancient Near East in order to fulfill his promises to his people.